Hello YouTubers, this is the Gold Standard ZZ924 coming at you with another video. So I'm going to be continuing some of these WrestleMania retro reviews. So I'm going to be reviewing WrestleMania 2000. This took place in Anaheim, California. Overall, this pay-per-view, it's kind of very mixed bag for a lot of fans because there's some people that like this pay-per-view and there's another side that hate the pay-per-view. Now, for WrestleMania 2000, it was one of the first pay-per-views I remember ordering as a kid. So obviously this is the first WrestleMania I can remember ordering and watching with my family. So, WrestleMania 2000, I mean, to me, it's not as bad as the previous WrestleMania where you had, that took place in Philadelphia with WrestleMania 15. 2000, I do admit that the card looked pretty unbalanced because unlike the last WrestleManias, the one in 2000 had pretty much nothing but multi-man tag team matches. So there's like a lot of tag team matches. There's like triple threats, fatal four-ways. The only singles match that they had at WrestleMania 2000 was the Cat versus Terri N. But that wasn't really a match. It was more of a cat fight that ran, that was basically over before it began. So it's nothing really to take seriously of. But other than that, the rest of the matches were either multi-man matches or just regular standard tag team matches. So 2000 does kind of get criticized for the lack of singles matches and just really how they try to shoehorn like a lot of these wrestlers, because the WWE or WWF at the time, by this point had a pretty stacked roster at this point. You had like a lot of WCW guys jump shipping over to the WWF. Guys like Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero, Malenko, Perry Saturn, and then you also had ECW guys like Taz, and later in the year you had guys like Raven come along. So WWE was starting to get pretty stacked with their roster. This is pretty much their one of their strongest years in terms of finance and just the overall quality of the product. But WrestleMania 2000, if you compare this to 15, they're just entirely different from each other. And to think that those pay-per-views were only a year apart, but they just felt so different. I mean, they still had the Attitude Era-esque feel to it, but I don't know if it's really because of the roster or the booking at the time, because Vince Russo was booking around the time for WrestleMania 15, and him along with Ed Ferrara didn't leave until October of '99. So apparently, there was a couple of changes in the writing staff, and I think that might have explained some of the direction and some of the storylines were kind of changing in that way. So apparently you see a lot of differences between this pay-per-view along with the previous one that I reviewed. So I mean, this pay-per-view, I mean, I don't give it as much flack, but I do admit that the card could have been a lot better. But to kind of go into detail with some of these matches, I'm just going to get started officially on this review. So we start off with the tag team match with the Godfather and D'Lo Brown taking on Big Bossman and Buchanon. This match was kind of a decent opener, but a little disappointing in a way. Just a lot of rest holds here and there. Just a lot of slow, methodical in-ring psychology. Now, and then they had Ice-T coming out along with the Godfather and D'Lo Brown. So, basically around that time, they were trying to promote the WWF Aggression CD, which was like a compilation of wrestlers' entrance themes that they used that were remixed or performed by a lot of hip-hop and rap artists that were pretty popular at the time. So, Ice-T, rapped to, the Godfather's entrance theme. So it was kind of nice to see Godfather and D'Lo Brown reunite because they were part of the Nation of Domination. So they kind of reunited here. The announcers don't make any mention that they were together at one point, but for a fact, Godfather and D'Lo Brown were a part of the Nation. So it was a little reunion of sorts, and they took on the Big Bossman and Buchanon. The match wasn't too long. Godfather and D'Lo Brown, there was like a lot of tag-ins, a few near falls here and there. The match ended when Bull Buchanan, the legal man, went for a top rope leg drop, and basically him and the Big Boss Man won the match. So this match, was kind of disappointing. I mean, it was okay. I think the slow pacing of the match kind of hurt it a bit. I think the crowd cheers is kind of what saved it. But that's basically it was kind of a little bit of a disappointing opener, even though it didn't really piss me off in that sort of way. But it's just almost felt like a complete bore fest. But I'm probably just being a little too generous on that part. But it was an okay opener. And then we get to the Hardcore Battle Royal, and this is for the Hardcore title. So basically, you had like 10 guys in there. You had like guys like Crash Holly, and then Hardcore Holly, Taz, Viscera, 3 members of the Mean Street Posses, Kai and Tai, the Acolytes, Viscera. So there was like a bunch of guys on there, and some of the headbangers, Thrasher and Mosh. It was Battle Royal. Now this is not the typical Battle Royal where you throw your opponent over the ropes and over to get eliminated, but this is kind of like what you say, like a precursor to what would eventually become the Scramble match. So basically what you had to do was either pin any of your opponents. It doesn't matter if you're the champion. And, eventually there's like this time limit where it runs for a certain amount of time. And then once you pin your opponent successfully, then you're the hardcore champion. And you have to hold the belt until the end of the match, until the time limit reaches 0 in order to officially make you like the undisputed hardcore champion. So it kind of works out as what would turn out to be the Scramble match several years later. But this was basically before that match even existed. So, this match just really felt very convoluted. You just have a lot of brawls around ringside, a little bit here in the ring, but mostly at ringside. Seeing all these guys brawling at once. There was like a couple of like 7-8 title changes, more than that. And there was times where there was like a moment where I believe it was one of the Kai Tai members. It was either Taka or Funaki, and one of them won the hardcore title, and then they were and they thought they were co-champions, but apparently Taka Michinoku won the belt, or Funaki did. And then they both chased each other backstage, and a lot of the other wrestlers followed suit. It was just it was a pretty boring brawl. Everyone was moving back and forth, and then they went back, and then like Mean Street Posses won it for a little while, and then more title changes hands. Eventually they went back to the ring, and then and the thing that really pissed me off was really the ending. It was like some botched moment where I think like Hardcore Holly like tried to go for a pin on Crash Holly, because like Crash I believe was still the champion, and then like Hardcore Holly went for the pinfall, but Crash Holly's shoulders were up, and then by the time the time limit reached 0, there was like a lot of confusion going on. And apparently they made Hardcore Holly the hardcore champion, even though Crash Holly kicked out. It was just so convoluted. It was just very confusing, and the Hardcore Battle Royal was just really terrible. the Hardcore Battle Royal was just kind of really hard to watch, and just seeing a lot of titles changing hands. So I mean, they did this whole 24/7 rule back in the day, but I think this was really mismanaged. Um, and personally, as much as I like the 24/7 rule, I mean, this battle royal was just really the whole 24/7 rule at its worst, and it's just really terrible match. So Hardcore Holly went as champion, and it's just really terrible. Then we have is the third match. This is Test and Albert, aka TNA, and they take on Al Snow and Steve Blackman, who they were called themselves Head Cheese. So apparently Trish Stratus had debuted a couple weeks prior, and eventually she gets Test and Albert to form like this sort of tag team. And so Trish Stratus was a valet at the time, and like I said, she had debuted. So this match didn't really last very long. Nothing really too memorable happened here. But TNA ended up going over Head Cheese. A match that probably would have suited well on like Sunday Night Heat or something, because the match obviously didn't last very long, and I think it would have been more worthy as a pre-show rather than actually being on the pay-per-view. Just not a really good match. I mean, nothing too memorable happened, so I'm not going to elaborate as much on that. And then we have is the fourth match. This is probably the most talked about match and really enjoyable, but this one is pretty groundbreaking, and this is the triangle ladder match for the tag team championship. So you have the Dudley Boyz going in as champion, taking on the Hardy Boys along with Edge and Christian. So yeah, this was actually a surprisingly great match, and just a lot of spots here and there. Like I remember like Bubba Ray Dudley did like a diamond cutter off the ladder, and Edge and Christian did like a couple high flying spots. Like Edge did the spear on Jeff Hardy on the ladder as well. Jeff Hardy doing a swanton bomb on Bubba Ray from the ladder through a table. So yeah, there was like a lot of spots. I could just go on forever, but it's not like as much of a spot fest as some of the rematches that they had, like the one with 17. I'm probably going to get more into detail with that during my WrestleMania 17 review up later on. It's going to be in a separate video, but I don't mean to get a little bit off subject. So I think this triangle ladder match, just a really extraordinary match. It really rejuvenated the tag team division. Ever since the days of the Hart Foundation and the Rockers, So eventually, Edge and Christian managed to win the tag belts here. So yeah, this was a really fun match. Just really put all these three tag teams over. Just really one of the most talked about matches, and it's very historically groundbreaking. Edge and Christian won the tag team titles. Just a really fun, just a really enjoyable match. I really enjoyed it. Then we have is the 6-person tag match or intergender tag. So you have the Radicalz taking on Too Cool and Chyna. So, I mean, this was actually a pretty short but a little fun match. The crowd was still cheering for Too Cool and Chyna. The Radicalz had Saturn and Eddie Guerrero and Malenko wrestling here. I thought this was actually a pretty fun match. I'm not sure why people kind of shit on it. But I mean, it wasn't a long match, but I thought it was pretty fun to watch. Didn't really bore to death in any way, unlike like the first and the third match. So the Radicalz, Too Cool, Chyna, fun match. We got to see like Sky Too Hottie doing like the double worm on Saturn and Malenko. Eddie Guerrero and Chyna having their little stare-offs. Just really a lot of funny stuff here and there. Eddie Guerrero, having a thing for Chyna, and whether or not Chyna could resist his Latino heat. So they were kind of playing up that whole thing. Um, so yeah, there was it was a pretty fun match just for entertainment purposes. Um, and so Chyna ended up getting the win for her team. So yeah, so Chyna did like a power bomb and then a sleeper drop. So eventually she wins for her team, like I said, and they won the match. So yeah, I had a really fun time watching this match. Just a pretty good match in my opinion. And then we have is the 2 out of 3 falls triple threat match for the European and the Intercontinental titles. So you have the champion Kurt Angle, who was also holding 2 of those belts, and he's defending both of them against Chris Jericho and Chris Benoit. This is actually a pretty good match. It's kind of a shame that the crowd just felt very dead. I mean, you would think they probably would have been dead because of the ladder match, but you had like the Radicalz and Too Cool who were in Chyna that had a match prior to this, and they were pretty hot for that match. But then you get to like the triple threat, it's like the crowd just, I don't know what happened with them. So and because WrestleMania was held in an arena as opposed to a stadium, so I guess the atmosphere wasn't as symbolic or as big as like the later WrestleManias. But so I mean the crowd just, I don't know. I mean, because I just can't really elaborate or at least explain it better. But getting back to the triple threat match, it was actually pretty good. A very solid, a little bit fast paced, but a little solid bout here. Just a couple submission holds, like Kurt Angle doing that chicken wing that Bob Backlund did. It was either on Jericho or Benoit. But that was a notable moment there. So Chris Benoit did like a diving headbutt on Jericho and won the Intercontinental title. So basically, despite that, you have the second fall, which was for the European title. So yeah, there were some moments where a lot of near falls along the way. Like Benoit did like a bridging German suplex, and then Kurt Angle trying to break it before he could count, before the ref could count to 3. And then the match ended when Chris Jericho did like a lion salt on Chris Benoit and won the European title. So yeah, this is actually a pretty fun match. Like I said, I just don't understand why the crowd was so dead. But and the fact that Kurt Angle never got pinned in any of those falls was kind of pretty interesting. So he didn't really look terrible going this match, but yeah, he won those belts. Then he never truly lost them because he was never pinned or submitted for that matter. But nonetheless, just a really fun match. Then we have is the tag team match with Kane and Rikishi, and they take on DX. So basically, it's Road Dogg and X-Pac. I'm not sure why Billy Gunn. I think Billy Gunn was supposed to be here, but he got injured. But Road Dogg teams with X-Pac instead. So this was actually a pretty short match, so there isn't really a whole lot to talk about. Maybe except for some of the moments. You actually had Pete Rose at some point. So yeah, it was mostly a brawl, and apparently Kane was still having his whole rivalry with X-Pac and Tori. Both those two betrayed Kane at some point during their feud, and eventually Road Dogg kind of got thrown in the mix. And as for Rikishi, I don't really know how they brought in Rikishi, because he was he was part of Too Cool, but yet he's teaming with random wrestlers. So yeah, he got inserted to make it a tag match. And Paul Bearer accompanied Kane as well. So I mean, the match, like I said, didn't last very long. Kane won when he tombstone piledriver X-Pac, and Kane ended up winning the match for him and Rikishi. So yeah, I mean, it was just a match that was just kind of there, but I thought it was okay. Um, you know, I, it had its moments. So yeah, so Pete Rose made an appearance for the third consecutive WrestleMania, and just as usual, Kane Tombstone Piledriver Pete Rose. So and I think he got stink face at the end. So yeah, so that was pretty much that WrestleMania moment for Kane. Um, so yeah, it was just a okay match. And then we have as our main event, which was the Fatal 4-Way Elimination match for the WWF title. So we have the champion Triple H taking on The Rock, along with the Big Show and Mick Foley. Yeah, surprisingly this match ran longer than it did. I think this match ran for like almost like 40 minutes or so. If you like cut out the entrances. So basically, The Rock won the Royal Rumble, and then Big Show said that The Rock never really won the Rumble because his foot touched the ground first. And then they had a match at No Way Out, and then like Shane McMahon came out and cost Rock the match. So it appeared that apparently the Big Show and Triple H were gonna fight at WrestleMania. But then The Rock somehow found his way back into the title picture. And then Linda McMahon came out and said that Mick Foley was going to get reinstated for one more match. Because Triple H beat Mick Foley, as Cactus Jack in that Hell in a Cell match. And apparently Linda McMahon rehired Mick Foley just for one match. And apparently, this kind of made it into like a fatal 4-way elimination match. So this match is kind of whether you kind of love it or you hate it. And it does seem kind of very convoluted in some places because they also had like every McMahon in their corner. So like Triple H had Stephanie McMahon, The Rock had Vince McMahon, Big Show had Shane, and Mick Foley had Linda. So I think kind of implementing the McMahons in this whole scenario kind of hurt the build to this pay-per-view. So, I mean, the match, I mean, it was somewhat enjoyable. You had, Big Show was the first one eliminated. So what happened was, Big Show got Irish, was bouncing off the ropes, and then Mick Foley whacked Big Show with the steel chair. And thus that allowed Rock to go for the Rock Bottom, and Big Show was eliminated first. And then Rock and Mick Foley teamed up against Triple H, and then Rock was about to pin Triple H, but then Mick Foley went for the Mandible Claw on the Rock. And there was a couple attempts where Mick Foley was trying to club Triple H with the barbed wire, but that sort of backfired. And Triple H took two pedigrees, and then he did a pedigree on the second pedigree on Mick Foley onto the steel chair, and eliminating Mick Foley there. So basically, it was Triple H and The Rock. So it was down to those two guys. Just a lot of heinous stuff going on, like Shane McMahon busting Vince McMahon wide open. So he had to get taken out by the some of the medicals and the referees. Triple H and Rock, they're still going at it. Rock did like a suplex on Triple H to a announce table, and I guess this was a little before that. Triple H did like a sick pile driver on the Rock onto the steel steps. So yeah, there was some pretty notable spots there, and eventually Shane McMahon was holding a steel chair. He was still in the ring, and then Vince McMahon came out and confronted Shane, and it looked like Vince McMahon was gonna smack Triple H with the steel chair, but instead he swerves the crowds, and Vince McMahon turned on The Rock and whacked The Rock with the steel chair. And it took like 2 attempts, and eventually Triple H retained the title. So this match overall, just a lot overbooking. it was good in some places. I mean, the match didn't bore me or anything, but definitely for a WrestleMania, it's a little disappointing. I mean, there was pretty much other alternatives for this main event. Like they could have maybe done Triple H and Cactus Jack in the Hell in a Cell match instead of at No Way Out. You could have done it at WrestleMania, because you hear like Mick Foley saying that he had dreamed of wrestling in the main event at Mania, and they could have easily built that up like there, and Mick Foley ended up having that proper send off that he did. So they could have they could have maybe saved the Hell in a Cell match for Mania, or they could have just had Rock win the Rumble like he did and going on to face Triple H in a one-on-one match. I think the latter would be my personal preference. So Triple H versus The Rock, they had their history. I mean, they could have just had a one-on-one match between those two. I don't really understand why they didn't do that. They could have just had The Rock win here instead of Triple H. I mean, they did. He like cut a promo in an interview prior to the match about how Rock's been through hell and back for the past 12 months, and the fact that he didn't win the belt here just kind of felt like there was something missing there, or something that just felt kind of wrong. But luckily, Rock didn't get buried. His momentum was still looking strong, despite the screwy finish. And Rock would go on to win the WWF title the next month at Backlash. So all's well ends well. And there was like a little aftermath after the Fatal 4-Way, where The Rock Bottom, both Vince and Shane McMahon, and as well as Stephanie McMahon, and did the People's Elbow on Stephanie, and that's basically how the match ends. Just really the aftermath. So WrestleMania 2000 overall. Now, if this sort of card had happened at a Backlash or some small WWE pay-per-view, this probably would deserve a pass. But because this is at a WrestleMania, it's kind of somewhat disappointing in a way. And I mean, I'm not as harsh on it like I was with my 15 review. But I do kind of agree that the card could have been rebooked, and they just could have done a better job organizing the match cards and not be so dominated by these tag team matches. I mean, did Teddy Long book this sort of card? We'll never know. But, WrestleMania 2000, just a pretty average pay-per-view, but because this is a WrestleMania pay-per-view, it's kind of disappointing. I mean, the only matches that really pissed me off was like the Hardcore Battle Royal. And I guess to some extent you could say that the finish to the Fatal 4-Way match was kind of anticlimactic. But other than that, I mean, the only matches I would recommend for you guys is to watch the ladder match. Just definitely very historically groundbreaking. Maybe the triple threat match, but triple threat match for the European IC titles, just to clarify. So WrestleMania 2000, in closing, just could have been so much better. So that's basically it for this review. Thank you all for watching. Stay tuned because I'm going to review on WrestleMania 17. So stick around for that. And until next time, this is the Gold Standard 00924 signing out.